Everybody, good morning and happy New Year's Eve. It's this is it. This is the last day of 2025. And I woke up this morning to read the headlines and check the feeds, and what did I see trending? Literally just the word taxes was the top trending on X when I first looked in. Like, okay, why are people talking about taxes today? Well, there's a few things going on in the news that are worth talking about, and we're going to start with this fantastic little video from this cute little blonde chick that just nails it. Now, what she's going to say for many of my audience is nothing new, but she does such an excellent job of putting a bow on it, of summarizing it all and laying it out so that your average citizen can really understand it. And she really nails that emotional hit on, yeah, you're taxed enough. In fact, you're taxed far, far too much. So we're gonna watch this. We're gonna watch the little clip.
Hear me out. You work for an entire year. You pay 24% federal tax, 5% state tax. That's 29% tax already. 29% of the year is 106 days. You're literally working 106 days for free before you even make $1 for your family. That's about how many days politicians actually work. Go to work, taxed. Save your money, taxed. 401k, taxed. Pension, taxed. Buy a car, taxed. Drive that car, taxed. Put gas in that car, extra taxed. Buy a home, taxed. Want to sell a home, taxed. You want to eat some food, taxed. Want a little drinky drink, taxed. Want to go fishing, taxed. Want to go shopping, taxed. Invest, taxed. Inherit, taxed. Die, you guessed it, taxed. And for what? To fund illegal migrants, foreign wars, and families scamming the system? Please! It seems we're in the land of the taxed and the home of the freeloaders. I think it might.
I love that. I love that last line. The land of the taxed and the home of the freeloaders. Just nailed it, right? So yeah, it's the end of the year, and if you own a small business or are working as a contractor, right? Maybe you're a W-2 guy and you just take a standard deduction every year, and it's not something you have to think about, right? But if you're property owner, business owner, small business operator, you've got cameras and microphones and shit, you got to start thinking about your depreciation schedules, what new equipment you bought this year, whether or not it's tax deductible, how much of it's tax deductible, how about your gas, how much of that is a business expense that's tax deductible. You better be on your P's and Q's. And in fact, really, if you're doing it right, you should probably be paying someone else to be on your P's and Q's for you, because, my man, you've only got so many brain cells to work with. And I don't know about y'all, but I spend mine aggressively, right? So we spend some thinking on this stuff. Now, thankfully, in my house, the way we do it is, instead of hiring somebody, just like I don't hire somebody to cook dinner, I have a wife that, I sent her to school to learn business stuff, and she does the taxes, and she does an incredibly good job with our taxes. Patrick says we're taxed more than Pharaoh taxed the Hebrews. Rod says inventory tax today and tomorrow. Yep, folks are moving equipment around today. Yes, things take up space, right? You pay, if you're a business with that has to keep inventory, you're paying taxes on on just the space that you store that inventory in, right? When you see businesses suddenly having big say, oh, it's a liquidation sale, et cetera, et cetera. It's not always about going out of business. Sometimes it's about moving the inventory so that you're evading is not the right word, but you're taking into account the taxes that you're spending on the existing inventory, things like that. You start looking at foreclosures happening. Banks don't want to hold property in perpetuity after they had to foreclose on somebody's defaulted loan, because now the bank is paying the taxes on that property. And we'll get into property tax a little bit more in just a minute here, but let's talk a little bit about the kinds of things that, why people are talking about taxes today. Obviously, it's the end of the year. People are going to expect to see their W-2s, their 1040s, and all those coming in in the next 30 days or so. You should see all your tax forms coming in the end of next month, right? And I know around here we get the taxes filed. We file taxes early and often. We don't like to let the government hold on to money that should be earning us interest. And that's, people rarely even talk about that hidden little piece right there. If you get a tax return, that means that the government took money that you did not even owe it, even according to its onerous, ridiculous, progressive rules, and stole from you the interest on that money. When they return the money that they should not have held to begin with, they do not compensate you for the interest that you lost on that money not being where it was supposed to be. But please believe, if you fail to pay on time, they will charge you interest. They will come after your ass. They will take a bite out of that. Okay? So let's excuse me. I'm much better today, but I'm still getting over the little bit of a hot hack and congestion. So I will stick with you as long as is useful this morning. But yeah, let me see. I've got a very long show map this morning, and I want to get into. Here we go. Let's talk about the 14th Amendment. But Lowry, but hey, Fat Boy, what does the 14th Amendment possibly, what could it possibly have to do with taxes? Isn't that about slavery and justice and shit? Oh. What are taxes? What are taxes? She made a good point. She got her numbers are a little squishy, but the point she made is you work 106 days a year for the government, right? Now, yes, understand we have a progressive tax structure from 10% to, what is it, 30? What are we at right now? 39 or 37%? I've got it in my notes somewhere. Anyway, the two highest states in the nation are charging you an effective tax bill that's so everyone pays about $16,000 on average if you're making around $100,000, right? So we'll call $100,000 a year kind of the benchmark for this conversation, because of the nature of the progressive taxes. If you're just under $100,000, it's really hard to tick over into just over $100,000, because the closer you get to it, as your income tax bracket adjusts, the harder it is to keep enough to break that line. Right? The tax structure is literally designed to prevent you from breaking out of the sub six figures range and getting into what would be considered in modernity solidly middle class. Right? The point is to destroy the middle class. Right? Never forget, the objective of the left is always and everywhere to reduce the number of people who are in the highest social stratus, right? To reduce the number of people who have the highest possible earnings, not because they want fewer millionaires and billionaires or they want fewer people to be wealthy, but because they want fewer people to have power concentrated in their hands, and to expand the lowest possible class. Excuse me. So the idea is that you have a one world homogenous slave state ruled over by an upper 1% of wealth and power controllers. That's what Klaus Schwab and George Soros are talking about when they say you will own nothing and be happy, and they talk about what they call stakeholders, right? Excuse me. And so in New York, for example, New York is the highest. The total taxes paid, federal plus New York, is about 37%. So you work more than one full quarter of the year for free, essentially as a slave. That's what a claim over your property and production and value is. That is what slavery is. Right? Go back for just a moment to the evilest thing that ever happened, which was slavery in the United States, which, of course, as you all know, only ever happened in the United States, ever. And nobody ever did slavery anywhere else. But let's just take all that for granted for a moment and understand something about slavery. Excuse me. Even in that environment, the slave did not give away everything he produced. Because at the end of the day, under that environment, a slave was a piece of equipment. Like my tractor, right? I do not write my tractor a paycheck. I don't. But I keep a cover on it. I put gas in it. I grease the fittings. I check the tire pressure. Right? The tractor produces value, and I spend some of that value to upkeep the tractor. I know there's some blue-haired liberal that's going to lose their shit about me comparing black slaves in pre-Civil War America to farm equipment, but yes, absolutely. A slave was a thing that you had to upkeep. You had to feed him. You had to clothe him. You had to put serviceable shoes on him. You had to provide him medical care when it became necessary. I mean, you could choose not to, but then your tractor sits there and rusts, and it costs you money for it to exist. Right? So if you're not spending on the upkeep of that piece of equipment, then the piece of equipment deteriorates substantially. What does this mean in practical terms within the conversation of taxes and the 14th Amendment? So if the slave is benefiting in part from his labor, and we still call him a slave, then the next question that is worth asking is, if any part of your labor is done not to your own direct benefit, then where's the line? So let's say that a black slave in pre-Civil War America, just for the sake of argument, but this is a little skewed, let's just call it 90-10. 90% of the product of his work goes directly to the slave owner, and only 10% comes back to him in the form of sustenance, shelter, clothing, care, upkeep, etc. Right? 90% of his work goes to the slave owner, and 10% returns to him. And at that level, we all relatively agree that that's what you would call a slave. Okay, fine. So what's the flip side? Is a free man taxed half? Is being not a slave? Are you not a slave when you keep half of your product? Let's not forget, Bernie Sanders famously gave an interview where he was asked about what is the fair share that people should be paying. And he freely admitted, I'd be comfortable with taxing everybody 90%. Well, in the model that I just laid out, which I think is a pretty reasonable example, a pretty reasonable analysis of the situation, that is slavery. That is slavery right there. Pitt Danny says it's more like indentured servitude. I push back on that. I would say that indentured servitude is also slavery. Right? Rod mentioned sharecropping. There are models where sharecropping is a little different. Sort of. For example, my next door neighbor has a couple hundred acres that he leases to a couple of guys who come out and plant cotton and harvest it. So they pay him to use his land, and then they keep everything that they produce after they've paid him, right? So, does that make them his slaves? I would say no. In that case, you're talking about a business arrangement. But at the end of the day, maybe they're talking about a 10-90 split, right? They're paying him 10% and keeping 90%. I don't know what the actual numbers are there. It's not my business. I don't. I'm not going to dig into it. They may only be paying 1% of their profit margin in the leasing fees. But the point is, let's just call that 10-90, right? The landowner's keeping 10% while the worker's keeping 90%. That we would probably make the argument that sounds like free men, and that's fair, right? But where is the divide? And I don't have a good answer for you. All I know is that the more that the government takes, the less free you are. Now, the 14th Amendment, obviously, I could be making the argument that the 14th Amendment should have eliminated all concept of taxation by the government, just under the argument that it abolished slavery. And that's a fun argument. It really is. That's a good one, right? The 14th Amendment abolished slavery, therefore there should be no taxes. That's good. It's a little juvenile, though. It's a little juvenile. It's a little basic. It kind of stops right there. I can intellectualize and philosophize on that and expand it more for fun. And yeah, like I said, fun argument. But what about this one? What about equal protection under the law? Now, at the federal level, equal protection under the law, equal treatment under the law. Right? Why should I, if I earn more than another person, be taxed more? That's not fair treatment. That's not equal treatment. Right? We've talked about things like the flat tax versus the fair tax. There have been a few different politicians who have argued for massive tax reform, and the two big ones that the libertarians like to talk about are the fair tax and the flat tax. Excuse me. Personally, if I'm not going to get total abolition of taxes, the flat tax goes over the fair tax. The fair tax is a little more convoluted and complex. The flat tax is just 20% tax, sales tax, right? Federal sales tax, 20%. That's it. Now, I would say 20% is a little too high. If 10% is good enough for God, it's good enough for the government. I think that's pretty simple. Like, how much of my money do you need? And there's the next big question. How much of my money do you really need? Now, when you look at the breakdown, we've got Hawaii and New York are the highest. So if you're making this is according to ChatGPT. These numbers are they're not quite dead nuts, and they don't take everything into account. Not quite. But on 100,000, and there's a lot of factors. Like this one says property tax. Well, that's hard to nail down, right? You can nail down the valuation standard for property taxation in a location, but when you're talking about across averages, uh, you know, you might have chosen to spend to invest more of your wealth in your property holdings than in something else that's taxed differently. So these numbers are very broad and rough, but ballpark, we're talking 37 grand in taxes if you're making $100,000 in New York. That's in the state of New York, not New York City, where the city has additional taxes on you, by the way. Hawaii, similarly, down to 30%, $30,000, 30,650 on average, right? Effective tax rate, 31%. So in those two, I'm amazed California was beat out by anybody, but yeah. But oh yeah, Pit Danny. Yeah, New York City is nightmare fuel. Like I said, I'm amazed California got beat out by anybody, but essentially you're working for more than the first quarter. You're working straight slave labor until mid-April to late May if you live in New York or Hawaii. The lowest tax states, Wyoming and Alaska, you're still out 20 grand, right? You're still out 20 grand in each of them, 21 and 20 respectively. No, sorry. Excuse me. 22 and 21. So you're still working for free for January and February. Patrick Brown points out Mom Donnie takes over New York City tomorrow. You don't have to worry about New York City, Patrick. They got their DEI hire at the New York Fire Department, so it's just going to burn down, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. So there's that. State by state, at best, you are a slave to the state for the first 2 months of the year. That's in your best situation. Now, the other piece that's trending this morning that's worth looking at is, let me see, I've got the clip. Here's the clip. Okay. Ron DeSantis has just made this statement, and honestly, this is the kind of thing that could secure my vote for DeSantis in 2028.
From the property tax situation, it's very important, given how that's pinched so many homeowners, particularly our senior citizens who have their homes paid off and they bought it 30 years ago for a certain amount. Now they're being told it's worth so much more and they have to pony up more and more money. It's almost like they have to pay rent to the government just to be able to enjoy their property. And that's...
It's not almost like they have to pay rent to the government. It is exactly the case that you must pay rent to the government, right? It's not almost like. It is the case that you pay rent to the government.
Wrong, and we need to do something about it. From the property tax.
So DeSantis is now making the argument, and people are paying attention to it, that yeah, property taxes have got to go. Anywhere and everywhere that you pay property tax, which is almost everywhere in the U.S. Believe it or not, there are places in the U.S. where you can own a home, you can own a piece of property in a home outside of the control of a local municipality where you do not pay property taxes to own that home. Those places, by and large, are inaccessible. And if you're going to try and own it and live on it, you're going to have to be completely self-sustaining, right? If you want to live on a property like that and have modern amenities, you're going to have to do solar. But by and large, if you want to live in the United States, you are going to be renting your property, whether you are actually renting, as in someone else owns your property and they pay the government rent, or you are the homeowner and pay the government rent. That's just how it goes, right? Like I got the cheat code. I'm a disabled veteran. I live in a zip code where, as a disabled veteran, I'm exempt from property tax. They got me though. They got me. They pulled a little trick. Yeah. I'm exempt from property tax on the property where is situated my primary residence in which I live. Right. So I can't just go buy up a whole bunch of extra land around the place and be tax exempt on all of it. If I go buy more properties, then I have to pay property tax on those. Yeah, funny story. My 8 acres out here, 3 of those acres are technically a separate lot. They're abutted. They're conjoined. It's just one big fucking chunk of land, but I have to pay taxes on a little 3-acre piece in the back. And you know what? It's going to stay that way because you can't have my private park. Come and take it from my cold, dead fingers. Good luck. But my contention with property taxes is this, it always has been. So long as it is the case, that you must pay taxes on your property, then you are never truly free. Okay? If you have to pay taxes to stay on your property, if the government is ever able to seize that land and take it from you based on whether or not you paid the taxes, then you are not free. Even indentured servants, even slaves in pre-Civil War America could, yes indeed could, and in cases did, earn enough to buy themselves from the contract holder, from the slave owner or the debt holder, the lien holder. They could earn the money and buy themselves, purchase their freedom, and become free. You, as an American citizen, do not have that option. You cannot purchase your freedom from the government. Because always and forever, as long as there are property taxes, you must pay that. You must generate some revenue in order to pay that property tax, in order to retain your claim to the land on which you reside. You do not have the choice to work for a living, earn enough money to purchase a piece of property, own it outright, drill a well, put up a solar panel, become totally self-sufficient, grow your own food, hunt your own land, right? In theory, you could just say, I don't even want electricity. I got a wood-burning stove, I got a hand-pumped well or a fresh spring, and I can grow crops, and I can hunt my acreage, or I could raise some beef cattle or pigs or whatever. I can just do straight up agriculture, hunting. I can choose to live in my cabin that I heat with, whatever's available. I could just live off my own land. No, you can't. Even the Amish have to raise revenue to pay taxes on the property that they occupy. You cannot truly be free. You cannot truly be free if you do not have the freedom to leave the system. You are trapped in it. You're retained in it in perpetuity. Now, that said, we're going into the new year. We do have some politicians that are making noise about getting rid of taxes. We've even got some conservatives in the state of Georgia, where I live, who are talking about trying to abolish the state income tax. Now, that's a pretty minor thing. I'd rather see them abolish the sales tax. Excuse me. If I had my way, the government would just have to get a job. If I had my way, we'd go back to the original constitutional founding intention, and the government would charge tariffs and fund all of its activity off of tariffs and expeditionary operations. Right? Oh, the government needs money to do a thing that the government wants to do? Cool. Why don't you go burn down a cartel, capture the capital, that excuse me, Excuse me. Capture that capital, not the capital of the cartel, the investment capital, the money, right? Tariffs and expeditionary capital capture. That would be the entire funding mechanism for the government, right? Then of course you're going to have some liberal, some socialist, some commie Marxist trick. Oh, but Lowry, the government needs so much money, right? What? How? If we don't have all that money, how are we going to fund food stamps and transgender surgeries and abortions? We're not. That's the biggest thing, right? I mean, why are people talking about taxes today? Yeah, because it's the end of the year. You talk about depreciation. Oh, and by the way, we just discovered that a bunch of illegal Somalis in Minnesota have stolen some $9 billion through fraud schemes. That was tax money. Right? That's before you even get into, where's my list? That's before you even look at the things that money's being spent on. Deeper civilization, final hammer. Taxpayer-funded gender transition procedures, puberty blockers funded through public health systems, DEI offices embedded in every federal agency, mandatory anti-racism training. Anti-racism training is, when you hear anti-racism, what they're saying is anti-white. Period. Racial grievance studies departments, queer theory grants with no empirical output, taxpayer-funded drag performances, gender ideology materials for children, DEI compliance auditors, equity czars, and advisory boards, grievance studies, university DEI bureaucracies, student loan subsidies, research grants awarded based on ideological statements, right? The shrimp on a treadmill, right? The study of reproductive habits of certain kinds of spiders in Africa. Okay, you know what? Be curious. Go study that. Go put cocktail shrimp on treadmills and see how long they can run before their little hearts explode. I'm all for it. Sounds like fun. You pay for it. You know, it sounds interesting. I might even watch a podcast about it. But you pay for it. You don't get to point a gun at my head and take my money and spend it on, tranny Sesame Street for Iraqis. Knock that shit off. And what do we see? We've got these closed, tight communities like the Somali pirates in Minnesota that are literally stealing billions of taxpayer dollars. So yeah, we're taxed enough already. We're taxed far too much. Quite simply, if our government cannot afford to fund a program through tariffs alone, then that program isn't necessary. It's that simple. It really is. Look, I like the big dinner spread at Maggiano's where they come in and they set the first course on the table. You got your fried mozzarella sticks and your big salad. You have a couple or three different salads, and you eat until you're tired of eating, like it's an all-you-can-eat buffet that they keep refilling, and then they bring the main course. Right? They bring your steak medallions and your pasta and all that, and then you eat until you're tired, until you can't eat anymore, and then they roll in the all-you-can-eat dessert wagon, and you eat until you're tired of eating, and then they pack everything up that was served but not eaten, and they send it home with you in to-go boxes. That's awesome. Do I do it every day? Fuck no, that's not in the budget. I don't do it every day. In fact, if history is to be believed, we do it about once every 10 years. It's an expensive dinner. And yeah, and do you know how that's different from a lot of the things that the government doesn't need to do, but it does do with your money? There's one very important difference between the extravagant Maggiano's all-you-can-eat banquet spread that I just described and all of the stuff that the government does with your money that it can't afford to be doing. I like the spread at Maggiano's. In fact, that's a thing that I would spend my money on voluntarily. Would I voluntarily spend my money for a public school teacher to tell my little boy that he's a little girl and he should chop his junk off? No. No, in fact, if I encountered a person trying to convince my little boy, my little battle, that he should end the Lowry name, well, somebody might not be walking away from that conversation with all their parts. And I guarantee you this, it won't be my little battle. He will be kept safe. All right. Yes, Rod, the Maggiano spread is even better when someone else pays for it. The first time I had the Maggiano spread was my grandmother's, I want to say it was her 65th birthday. It was either 60 or 65. And my uncle paid for it, and it was awesome. And then I paid for it for my mother's 60th. And it was awesome. And I've done it 3 times. I don't remember who paid for the other. Oh no. Yeah, I've had somebody else pay for it once, and I paid for it twice. And I mean it's not that bad. It's like I think the last time we did it, it was. I think the last time we did it, we had 15 people there, and it was about $850 before tip, and I tipped the staff like $250 for that one. So that was, yeah. I mean that's not for what it is. That's not outrageous. Well, actually, for what it is, that'd be a bargain today. 10 years ago, it was not outrageous. Pit Danny, Maggiano's is up by, I think it's by Lenox Mall. Yeah. Rod says he used to get Maggiano's takeout for his folks. They used to have a deal. They don't do it anymore, but they used to have a deal where you go in and order a lunch entree, right? You get your chicken parm or eggplant parm or whatever. And they actually serve you 2 meals. So basically you get your lunch and then they give you a to-go plate. Not like they bring out a box and you pack up the leftovers. They serve, okay, this is what you're having for lunch, and then they bring it out packaged to take home, so you've got a whole second meal to warm up later. And it was not much more expensive than the lunch specials surrounding it. They don't do that anymore, but that was okay. Now we are way off topic. Abolish all taxes. Live free. Be happy. Happy New Year, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.